Hello there, this is Sohail Hasni, your host at Energypreneurs. Cheap solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles are changing the transport and energy sector as we know. I bring in guests to this podcast who will help you with their ideas to navigate this energy transition. Thank you for joining. Hi, good morning from Manila.
Good morning from Chicago.
Emily, I want to learn a lot of things. It's very excited to be here. Maybe you can do an introduction of yourself first.
Sure. So my name is Emily Dreibelbis. I am an EV reporter for PCMag. So PCMag has been around for 41 years now. Initially started covering personal computers, that's the PC part, and now with cars becoming computers and all these tech companies that PCMag's been covering for years and years, they're all now putting their tech in the cars. So now we have an EV reporter, and that is me.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I think everything is a computer, so it's a good excuse.
Yes, exactly. And it's fun.
That's very important as well, to have fun. Now, where do you think electric vehicles are headed right now? In the last few years, I'm very excited. Suddenly, it seems like that we have crossed that threshold where everybody start talking and people are getting into EV in a real big way.
Yeah. I guess my perspective is US centric. I do around the world adoption is higher, but I will speak more for the US. So I think here, what happened in 2023 is people got really interested in EVs. There's a lot more awareness about them. When we watch the Super Bowl, all the car commercials most of them are now electric vehicle commercials, which is a big shift in such a big national arena like the Super Bowl. So that's just proof that there's a lot of attention on EVs, a lot of interest. Adoption went from 4% of new car sales were electric to now it's about 8% in the US. I know in other places like Europe and Asia, it's 20% or higher in certain countries. So we are lagging, which is maybe hard for some Americans to admit. But this is an area where US car culture is just so embedded and so cemented and just such a big part of the identity. And there's so much long distance driving in the US that it's been hard to get faster adoption. And also the prices are high. So I would say 2023 is ending a little less optimistic than at the beginning of the year. Beginning of the year, it was all about EVs. Any discussion of even a hybrid was taboo, not far enough. And Toyota, they removed their CEO who wanted to push hybrids. And so it was all EVs. And now we're ending the year with some of the automakers saying, okay, we spent the whole year exploring how to make EVs happen. And now we have arrived at the conclusion that it's too expensive and people aren't willing to pay much more for what they perceive as a lower range. And again, we have a lot of long distance driving, cold weather driving. So there's some tough challenges, people in apartments. So I think the prediction for next year is slower adoption, but still more and more adoption. So I said we went from 4 to 8 last year %, which is doubling. I don't think it will go from 8 to 16% in the US next year. I think it might go from 8 to 10%. So still adoption, but I don't think it's going to be that exponential curve that maybe some of us have in our head.
Yeah, of course, you have a very large base. So percentage points, very different in US than any other smaller country, talking about percentage points, right?
Yeah, there's just so many use cases, and the EVs as they are right now can't meet them all. But there are still enough people, particularly wealthier people in warm climates who do city driving. There's quite enough of them that could certainly benefit from an EV and will continue to buy them and enjoy them and love them and move it all forward.
Yeah, that's interesting because is Chicago part of the ban of ICE cars beyond 2030? New sales, or it's legally?
I don't think Illinois is part of it. California, Massachusetts, New Jersey. There's a couple different ones sprinkled mostly on the coasts. But you're right. That doesn't really align with where the auto industry and consumers are today. It's a very ambitious goal. And I did see that Colorado just passed their revised percentage of EVs number that they'll have. And as a sign of the times, they went for 82%, not 100 like those other states. So I think some governments are realizing, okay, there's people in rural areas, there's people who have small businesses who don't want to spend all that extra money on an EV. And over the course of the year, I think people have just really learned about what it takes to drive an EV regularly and are adjusting. Those other states are just certainly relying on battery technology improving, and they're relying on the price coming down. So they have some time, 12 years before those bans would go into effect, but we'll see.
Other thing interesting is I posted that on LinkedIn the other day for the Australian context as well, that if you are buying a ICE car today, in 7 years' time, you won't be able to sell, or it will appreciate significantly more than what you have been expecting. Please take that into your financial analysis, because it may not be that value you have in 7 years' time that you're thinking, oh, I'll upgrade.
Yeah, Teslas have certainly depreciated like crazy.
Now, I was talking about ICE cars. Teslas have depreciated because they also have prices, right? So if you are deciding, should I buy a Tesla or a BYD Dolphin rather than buying a Corolla or something else, but in 7 years' time, you look at it, say, I thought my Corolla will retain X percentage of value, but it may not, because the world will change.
Yeah, it could go either way, because I think in some ways scarcity creates value. So if you can't buy a gas car anymore, maybe the remaining ones will be like super expensive because people really them, or they'll be useless chunks of metal.
It's only fully useless, but other interesting thing is, this is what argument I use with one of the finance ministers in a small country in Kyrgyz Republic in Central Asia, where I used to work. I was arguing the minister that saying, if you do not do anything about EVs, you get all second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand car in Europe. They're land connected with Europe. So everyone have moved on or have a ban of buying. So what happened? All the second-hand car keeps coming, and your country will get polluted more and more because you have no rule on EV. So maybe you can do either an EV retrofit and send them back to Europe, or you do the same. Otherwise, so I see the same interesting phenomenon in Chicago if Chicago don't do anything.
Yeah, I think so. I'm very supportive of like climate initiatives, and I'm concerned about all that. I do find I'm a little bit cynical about how the US is handling it. And a little bit of my doubt, or like an underlying hesitation I have about EVs, is that I write about EVs as my job, but I actually can't buy one. It wouldn't work for my use case. So as much as I'm a proponent of them, I am also a realist. So the reason it wouldn't work for me is because I live in an apartment where I can't charge. So it wouldn't make any sense for me. I'm a journalist. I'm not an investment banker. I don't make that huge amount of money. So I can't rationalize buying a car that I can't fuel up, and that would also, in the cold weather in Chicago, get 65, 70% of the range that I supposedly bought. So for me, I've test driven enough cars. It doesn't make sense for me. I have to also acknowledge that. And I think when people do get an EV and they live in a single family home where they can charge and they love it, that would be my parents, for example. They're super hype on EVs, but for me, I can't neglect that they don't actually even work for me, even though I'm an EV writer. So that's some of my perspective as well on this issue.
Absolutely. The point that you make is very valid, because somebody living in Singapore or any of the warmer climate and doing very short distances, for them it's a no-brainer. Don't have to think at all.
Yeah.
But if you're in Chicago, or if you're in Astana or Kazakhstan or in Mongolia, and you get those extreme cold weathers, your technology needs to be a little different. But I saw quite a number of these when I was in the middle of winter in Chicago. I said, wow.
Oh, yeah. My street has every EV. It's like an EV showcase. I live on a busy street with a bunch of stores and restaurants and a really fun part of Chicago, but there actually aren't a lot of chargers in that area. So I don't know if people are coming in from the suburbs and doing whatever they're doing in their EVs, probably. But yeah, I think another thing is that in the US, we can't buy Chinese EVs, like the BYD Dolphin. There's none of them in the US. So they're making the cheapest EVs and we don't have any of them. So the price point is
interesting.
higher.
Why is that?
I think it's politics.
Oh, okay. Because I thought BYD was available. They just recently launched in Australia in a big way, become very popular in Australia.
Yeah. No one in the US knows what BYD is.
Yeah. And then the Tesla is still expensive, although they have reduced quite a number of times the prices. And for us in Australia, it kept on going up because Australian dollar has depreciated quite a bit.
Yeah, the US has a big problem with China because China controls the supply of minerals that go in the batteries. They have 80% of the global supply. Some people have even said 95%. No one has good data on what China is doing, but they have a lot of the batteries and the battery minerals. And the prices are just too high for the US. I don't know if it's tariffs or what, but we don't have the super mass manufacturing capacity that they have. And they also have all the batteries, and we can't buy their cars. Although some US manufacturers partner with Chinese companies to put their batteries in the cars. So I don't know like how you're splitting hairs here driving like Chinese EVs or not, but NIO, BYD, like you can't buy any of that in the US.
Yeah, NIO also struggling with the share prices. I've been following NIO because I interviewed a strategy person for NIO when I first started the podcast during COVID time. And I said, oh, wow, the share prices have been going down and down and down. But irrespective, of course, the few struggles we will have with the new technology, especially Chicago is an exceptional case because being so cold. But overall, I think globally and US in general, across other jurisdictions, you are saying that it will slow down a bit next year's adoption, but not as much as anticipated.
Yeah, and I think that because Ford and GM and Tesla in their Q3 earnings calls all said that. If you don't believe me, believe them, I would say, but they're framing it as near-term slowdown. A good example is like GM. So they make the cheapest EV in the US, and their EV sales went up 30% in Q3, but it's all that car pretty much. And they're just continuing that car. So they're going to see slower near-term demand. But another thing happening in the US is the interest rates are really high. So that's what Elon Musk said on the Tesla call. It's just very expensive to buy a car in general, and especially an EV. You're going to have a bigger loan on that car, more interest. So it's not very attractive consumer market in general for homes, cars, anything.
That's actually a very fair point because EVs are better in the long run because operation costs are low. But if you're doing a math to buy EV or not, you look at the capital cost. Now that has increased significantly because of the interest rate. Because you don't think about interest rate when you're paying for your petrol or gasoline.
Just they're cheaper cars, I think. So your loan's going to be smaller.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The capital outlay, because when you're looking at the long term.
Yeah, exactly.
That may be more reason for some of the utilities in US offering their car as a part of leased hood. I saw in Australia some companies are doing, I forgot exactly the name of it, but then you go to their website and you can say, I want to buy a Tesla as part of my electricity plan. And they will say, okay, you pay 300, I forgot the exact amount per week. And the car is yours and you can charge in all our charging points, or they have some transactions. So you basically get a car for $300 or X number of dollars per month or per week fixed.
Interesting. I don't know if we have anything like that. There is something that is changing in the US next year, which is our federal tax credit, which is up to $7,500. Next year, you'll be able to get that money when you buy the car in the form of a discount. And then the dealership or Tesla.com or whatever, it will get reimbursed from the government within 48 hours, I think. Whereas right now, you have to wait until tax season, March, April, to get that. So you still have that super high upfront price. Now they're trying to give you that money at the start to lower the barrier to entry, which I think is really great.
Good. So what do you think the government in terms of policy needs to do if the government still has interest in pushing it? And are there anybody trying to capture and give some money as the carbon offset? Because driving in a cold weather in Chicago will save a lot more in terms of CO2 footprint against another car, because gasoline and everything, it's become super inefficient, the car driving on a road because of your extremely high heating needs.
I think what the government could do, just because the EV proposition is so challenging for so many people, is they could be more serious about subsidizing hybrids, which would work perfectly well in Chicago. But in Chicago, the base norm of what a car is not a hybrid. It's just a regular old, inefficient, bad technology, gas-powered car. And I'm thinking we need to update in the US, at least that base idea of what a car is. It should be at least a hybrid. That would work well in Chicago. It would reduce emissions. So I think there could be more focus on just completing that. It seems like the momentum is wanting to skip that whole phase and just go right to EVs, and so many debates about it. And everyone loves to debate, like, should we do hybrids or not, at least in the US.
But the hybrid is such a small battery, no? It really doesn't get you the benefit of an EV.
Yeah, it doesn't plug in and it doesn't have that smooth EV thing, but it does have better performance of the car and it does increase fuel efficiency a lot. I don't know, like, I'm frustrated that we even have so many gas powered cars in the US, but 99% of cars in the US are ICE gas powered cars, and the miles per gallon and the fuel efficiency is just lower and it's a worse car. So I feel like we need to at least make some progress. If people like me, like I could buy a hybrid now, I could still buy a gas car, but I should push myself to buy a hybrid, is what I'm saying. I can't buy an EV for the reasons I said.
Yeah, unless the next generation of smaller EVs and other comes in.
Yeah, but I just need a place to charge mostly. No matter, it could be a Ford F-150, it could be a huge EV or a tiny one. I still can't charge it.
We bought a Model Y last year in Sydney, and my wife was not touching because we still have a 4-liter typical Australian Ford car, and she did not want initially switch. Now she has started because she said it was too much technical for me. And now she'll go back. Her concern was also that how many times do I have to charge if I forget? Because she does the small distances on an average, maybe 30, 35 kilometer max. So the range gives her, the need becomes very small. She can only need to charge only once a week. So I think in your case as well, yes, it would be nice to have an ability to charge in an apartment, which not all apartments have done it yet. But have you done the calculation? Of course, you have the cold factor that do I really need that much range? You can charge at workplace and everywhere else.
No, I work from home and there's only a couple fast chargers in my neighborhood, and fast charging is roughly the same price as gas. So the electricity savings are better. I don't want to be a total like naysayer. Like, I drive EVs all the time, like for my job, and I prefer them for sure. I'm just a realist and I'm practical. So that's like where I'm coming from. I have no problem. I've taken road trips in EVs. I have no problem with the charging. I don't have the proper infrastructure, just point blank.
Yeah, because this is something I found interesting. I am actually having a dialogue with the regulators here in the Philippines when I'm here visiting. One of the discussion is, yes, EV charging is an unregulated business globally, because maybe it's time that regulators can come in and say, hey, for the next 3 to 5 years, let's regulate the business, at least put a price cap on and make it a sort of a pseudo monopoly. So at least in a geographical sense, you can give it to someone saying, hey, you have exclusive monopoly. That means you don't have to compete with anyone. In lieu of that, we'll put a price cap so you really cannot charge 65 cents a kilowatt hour while the electricity cost is 10. So what's your view on that?
I think that would be very effective. I do think, though, that the car companies, they're not charities. Like, they don't want to. The reason they're slowing down on EVs is they can't be profitable making them right now at a low cost. And even at the high cost, they're not profitable. So I don't think the business environment in the US would be very amenable to any kind of top-down price capping on industry. That's just not necessarily how the economy works. So I don't think it would be possible to pass a bill like that.
Yeah, the reason I'm suggesting, or I was thinking along those lines, you could do that through industry consultation as well, right? It's in the interest of any of the EV manufacturers. If they plan to build 10 chargers tomorrow and they don't know what others are doing, but if you get collectively saying, hey, you know what? If we did not get into the charge infrastructure revenue, because it's a tiny part of the revenue anyway, a private sector player will come and definitely build 200. And that's the regulatory bargain that the government is talking to them. At least then everyone wins. Because you take the uncertainty away. I talked to a lot of startup CEOs here. Oh, we put this here, charging, but then we are hoping, how do we compete? The standards, who will come? Tesla guy, will they come or not? So just a thought experiment.
Wait, so what are you proposing?
No, what I'm saying that the charging becomes a monopoly service, at least for the next 3 years, like a power distribution company.
It just doesn't work in the US. They won't do it. The word monopoly is like the word like Voldemort. Like you just can't say it. It's not even on the table.
It's like a regulation by contract. You don't have to say monopoly.
I think that would work very well. That's why I'm like a cynical on what the way the US does some things. But the goal in the US is basically to make the offering so compelling that the market demands it, which is a classic Western capitalism philosophy. And that seems to be what's going to happen. You wouldn't believe the pushback to the federal tax credits. There's just a lot of lack of support even for that.
Initially, Tesla was trying. I have a brother-in-law in California. He has one of those cars that is grandfathered in, that for the life of the car, he gets free charging, all supercharger, wherever he goes. So maybe the car companies can start looking at that as well to build that into the price. The marginal cost of charging then comes in. If you go to a supercharger saying, oh my God, it's the same as the gasoline, where is the savings?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how serious the car companies are about selling EVs. Like I said, they're not environmental organizations. They're not charities. They are for-profit businesses. So I do wonder like how much they're doing and if they could be doing more. I don't really know because they say they're all in on EVs, but then they discontinue their cheapest EV, for example, like a GM. So I'm not quite sure. Like they could be bundling more charging incentives. They do give a couple years free, usually on the more luxury models. But it seems like they're just not able to make these things work for a mass market right now.
Interesting. So what you have been writing about in terms of EV, do you write mostly about policies or you also write about specific cases?
So I write mostly about policy. Partially because a lot of the political debates always come back to the same thing, like China and batteries. I write about that, but it's the same theme. It's not solved yet. I keep up with it though. I write about battery technology because, like I said, the biggest thing everyone's waiting for because an EV and the battery technology is very good now. It's not totally on par with how far a gas car can go before being refueled, but it is getting good. Write about the release of all the new EVs in the US, and I look at all their stats, their range, their charging speed. And I also write about research on new battery technologies, battery types, like lithium iron phosphate is now a big one in the US and in China. China started that, and Tesla. So yeah, I write about the new cars on the market, battery technologies, those are my big things, and then consumer incentives as well. So that kind of gets into the policy. Yeah.
On the battery, how hopeful are you that the battery price will keep coming down? Some people say no, because of COVID, I think it changed the trajectory a bit, but still it looks like it's following the original forecast of going towards $50 a kilowatt hour by 2030 or 2027.
Yeah, I saw a graph that showed that prices were going down. What have you seen?
Yeah, I even saw that at a cell level, it went down below $90 a kilowatt hour. That's quite amazing because when I did the first project of EV some years back in 2011, it was $1,400 a kilowatt hour. So it's come down a long way.
Yeah, it has. I'm not seeing that translated into the current cars on the market yet.
Yep.
I do hope it does come down. I suppose it all depends on if China sells it to the US at a cheaper price. They're mining the lithium, they have mines all over the world, so it just depends on what they sell it for. And then in the US, there's some lithium, but actually there are some huge repositories, but there's a lot of pushback and a lot of environmental issues on mining them. And then there's the growing battery recycling industry, which would repurpose what's already in the US, which would be really great. So I'm not really sure if those graphs are real or not in terms of how it will translate to consumers in terms of prices.
Yeah, that's the interesting part because at the battery cell level prices have come down. Battery pack level definitely did not. If you look at the Tesla Powerwall 2 price and then Powerwall 3 that just got released in US, we have not seen that in Australia yet. And then so, the price is actually much higher still because the pack and everything else, how it translates. Oh, by the way, most of the lithium now getting still in the last few years came out of Australia, not from China.
Does China own the mines in Australia? Or are
Yeah.
they Australian owned?
They own definitely some of the mines, but a lot is still Australian owned. But there is a lot of debate going on now in Australia as to why should we just dig out and send lithium back and get the car back? Can we start manufacturing domestically?
That would be cool.
It's a very small population.
Vietnam is manufacturing EVs now. So are you following that? So they can do it. Australia can do it.
Yeah, because Australia has a huge market. But I just posted last night interview with Ricardo, who used to work for Tesla as well. He said, no, maybe not yet, because we don't have the population base for doing it. Now, you follow batteries. What are the technologies that are emerging, you think?
I just wrote a piece on wireless charging, which was really fun. They're making a lot of progress on that. And a lot of car companies in the US are testing that. Tesla just bought a wireless charging company that has the foremost IP on it. And the Society of Automotive Engineers in the US, which kind of sets the standards for the products that can be sold. So once they set the specs and the standards for a consumer product, then the brands can make it and sell it within that standard for safety and whatever. But they just set a standard for wireless charging. Actually, that was a couple of years ago. Tesla just bought a wireless charging company, and now BMW, Ford, Tesla, everybody is like secretly prototyping it, which I think would be really cool because the way it works is the car drives over a pad on the ground, and then the pad on the ground wirelessly charges the battery at the base of the car. And I really like that just aesthetically in some ways, because you don't have these really ugly like R2D2 stations everywhere with like these big, thick black hoses coming out of them, and they're really ugly. So if we could get rid of those, I think I'd be excited about that. Battery tech, the biggest thing is Toyota claims to have figured out solid state batteries. And so they're saying they're going to have battery with over 700 miles of range and double the amount of range possible now, basically. So they said they've figured out solid state, which is quite a claim, and they are sticking to it.
Yeah, Toyota I don't trust, because they have been, in Australia, they have been opposing electric vehicles. They said we should slow down. And Toyota have been pushing their Toyota Mirai, the hydrogen car. So I think they just want to push for Mirai in the disguise of, oh, we got a new battery. By the way, who needs a 1,500 kilometer range battery? Our family, we went from Sydney to Sunshine Coast, a distance of about 1,000 kilometers, which is 620 miles in a single day. And do I want to do that again? Maybe not. It was fun, but the car distance was not the limit. Limit was my ability to keep on driving, because I'm not a truckie. I'm not doing interstate deliveries. It's fun. I'll do that again. Maybe I don't want to buy a car that can do that every week. It's a waste of money to have that capacity sitting in my car all the time, like buying big plates at home saying eat a lot.
Maybe they'll take the big plate and they'll carve it up into little Tupperwares and make smaller batteries, and it'll be like, I don't know where they got that 1,500 kilometer number, or if they would just take that capacity and then use a smaller battery and the car would still have half of that. I don't really know. I agree. It's odd, Toyota's marketing right now. I'm intrigued.
I also personally think this whole range anxiety is a virus released by the fossil fuel industry, so that people get stuck with the electric vehicle adoption because of the range. Because average person does 30 kilometer globally, maybe 100 kilometer a day if you're living in Chicago. Chicago is a big city, but still doing on an everyday commute. 100 kilometers is quite a lot of kilometers sitting on a traffic jam.
But I'll be honest, with the price of the car, you get less value out of it if you can't use that same car for a trip. So that's the problem. You're absolutely right. If I had a car, I would drive so little. If I'm just in the city, it would be very little driving. Absolutely. But I mostly use public transit. And then for me, a car would help me do some of the kind of popular day trips from Chicago, like hikes or just going to different things. Like there's an outlet mall or whatever, the cool things outside the city. And I took the Tesla in the winter, and I couldn't even go 2 hours to a hike without charging. And it was just a bummer. So to me, it's just the value for what you're buying because you're right. If you can't do all the tricks, then you're getting less for your money.
Yeah. Chicago is quite an exception because I was talking to people in Astana, the formal capital of Kazakhstan. I've never been that cold in my life. It was minus 38. And they were saying we have a wind chill factor, so they have to keep their car running. If they miss, so it's covered in snow. So you have to ask a company who will come and they have technology to defrost your car back. I'm saying Chicago is a similar circumstances in winter, right? So even your fossil car, ice car struggles in Chicago, right?
No, it wouldn't struggle. You're going to have ice on the windshield, but the performance doesn't.
But if you leave a car behind for a few days,
that's a big difference. The gas is still fine in there.
the gas will not freeze, I understand. But in Astana, what they told me that the whole car needs a different sort of treatment if you leave it for a few days because when it gets very cold.
I'm not sure. I think Chicago has a reputation of being really cold, but like my parents live in New Jersey, which is like right around New York City. And it's cold there too. Like it's cold in a lot of places. Not like Chicago, but like their EV, they have a Chevy Bolt, and they only recently started driving it to my grandmother's house, which is like 2 hours away. She lives in a rural area. She lives on a farm, actually. So it's like super far apart. And they were not able to drive the car with confidence those 2 hours because it couldn't make it there and back without charging. And it was like a rural area and they didn't know exactly where to charge. So they were using their gas car. And even to visit like my sister in DC, which is 2.5 hours south of where they live, you have to charge both ways. So it is easier in the gas car, especially considering you're also in traffic a lot. You don't want to be in the car. You just want to get to where you're going. So the range is just a little bit extra of a thing to worry about, but it's getting better. Like my parents started driving the car there and maybe they're just like getting over it or they're finding something to do when they're charging. So yeah, hopefully I'm not brainwashed by the fossil fuel industry, but I do feel like I have enough experience with EVs to have made my own opinion. And I support EVs. I write about them all day. I support climate initiatives. I still think the range is a little bit annoying for the examples I've seen in my life.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree. If you have temperatures like Chicago, range is an issue. If you have distances like rural Australia or rural California, range is an issue because people go for fishing for maybe 300 kilometers. But that virus, when it comes to Asia, that's really worry because I'm in the Philippines right now. Here, average speed maybe 12 kilometers an hour. It's very difficult to drive in the city. So much traffic, people actually sitting there and running their ice engines. You lose fossil fuel that way. But if you're sitting in an electric car, if you're not running air conditioning, you won't lose anything. But here, when people talk about range, that I think it does not do the right service for the world because I'm part of some of the Tesla owners group here, although I do not own a Tesla here. And I was talking to them saying, how far have you gone? Oh, my car can do 450. I said, have you tried going 450 kilometers in the Philippines? Then finally someone said, oh, I went that place and came back. It was okay. I said, yes, that place is only 150 kilometers. It's an effort in the Philippines to do 150 kilometers and come back. Same will be in Indonesia, same will be in Delhi, same will be in Dhaka, or any of the mega cities, right? Vietnam, you mentioned. But if you apply there, say, oh, no, I should not buy an EV because my friends in California, my friends in Chicago saying range is an issue. I think that's a virus not appropriate for smaller cities with lots of traffic.
Yeah, I think you have a really interesting global perspective. The thing with EVs and why I do talk about my personal opinion and my personal perspective so much is because it is really personal and there's so many different driving scenarios and so many examples and everybody has their own what they want to do with their car. And I think EVs are really exposing all the ways that people use cars and all the climates and all the countries and all the cities. And so I find it really hard to speak to if EVs will work for everybody. And so that's why I'm just more comfortable with what I've seen in my perspective. So that's why I'm sharing that. It's endless, the scenarios you could use a car for.
Yeah. And you are the opinion makers. If you are writing about EVs, right? What you write, other people read. Of course, you have much better credibility than average person.
I do write very positively about EVs, and I keep it super open-ended, and I highlight all the cars coming out on the market. And really, it's just here's all the information, and so people can make their own decision. It's not really, we're on a podcast, so I'm giving my opinion, but I'm not necessarily an opinion writer. So there's a difference. I don't just go on Emily's personal EV diaries.
I have driven from a tricycle, bicycles, and of course, I was trying to do a large public sector project on EV. So 10 years back, I had to drive a lot of different things just because I was trying to convince a lot of politicians and bankers about it. So I had to make sure that I understand and what I'm saying is correct.
Yeah, you have such interesting experience. And I don't know, are you feeling like positive about EVs in Australia and Philippines?
I think Australia is a country of early adopters. We did not have any solar, I think, until 2006. Now we have the highest in the world. Once it goes, it goes. So now we have 1 kilowatt per capita, which is much higher than Germany, which is 600 to 800. So I personally think in Australia, EVs will come in a big way because the income threshold, cost threshold is issue. But unlike what you just mentioned earlier, I think we are getting EVs of all kinds, especially cheaper Chinese EVs are coming in, Korean EVs are coming in, and hopefully Tesla prices will come down, although because Australian dollar has depreciated quite a bit lately, so all the cars are priced in US dollars when they get translated.
Oh, that's not good. On the Korean EVs, like you said, I just saw this. I think the Korean car companies are doing a great job, like Hyundai, Kia, those are the ones we have. And their EVs are great. I just saw this chart today that they charge faster than Tesla's. Edmunds, which is a big historic car publication in the US, they did this study of, I don't know how many EVs, like 40, 50. And the top ones in terms of charging speed were Hyundai, Kia, and then the Porsche Taycan, which I also love. That's what I would get if I could. So yeah, I think there are a lot of good cars out there if you can get them.
Yes. And then I interviewed someone from California many years ago. She was saying, oh, the car companies don't promote the EVs properly because this is a women's car. I said, why? He said, every time you go to a mechanic, if you're not technical, they tell you mumbo jumbo, they charge you so much more. And I realized, yes, that is an aspect very true. Like when I'm in Sydney, I come back with half the price that my wife would have paid. She always said that every time I go, the mechanic will say, oh, this needs to be changed, a long list. But good, when we bought the Tesla, it came with an instruction, do not come back to us for next 2 years. I thought that will save quite a bit, at least not going to the mechanics.
I think the mechanics can take their sexism and shove it up their ass because EVs are basically reducing their workload because they have fewer parts and they're easier to maintain. So that would be my perspective on that.
Yes, I think, but that needs to be also promoted. The people trying to sell the electric car saying, hey, this is a car that will keep the mechanics away. It's like the Apple keeping the doctors away, right?
Yeah. I was just reacting to if they're going to treat your wife differently than you, then they're not.
Yeah, it's not my wife. I think in general, mechanics globally, smaller mechanics, they always try to sell. And the perception is that women maybe knows less about a car than the man does.
Right.
They say, okay, you have to change these.
Like
And
to
every
get
time
over
she
with it.
goes, that's what I meant. If you don't go there, you don't have to get exposed.
Yeah. I said they'll have fewer opportunities to do that.
Yeah, that's what the EV companies should package it in as well, saying you don't have to go to the mechanics.
Yeah, there's a lot of good benefits. I also just wrote an article recently that the battery doesn't need to be replaced as often as people think. A lot of people think, oh, you get an EV. Some people think you have to replace the battery in 2 years. Like the misinformation is insane. And you absolutely do not. If you keep your car for 10 years, which a lot of people don't even anymore because they want to just get the new hottest thing, but the battery should last as long as 10 years or so. That's what the study said. So that's another thing that I think car companies could be more vocal about.
Yep. Do you also write about the V2G and V2 L is because that's something also very important, right?
Yeah.
I wrote an article the other day that if you have a car and if you have a power crisis, you can, of course, connect your car back. And if you take that into consideration, maybe in some rural areas, people don't need to invest in a backup generation where power is unreliable, especially in the context of Asia.
Yeah, that's a really cool application. And I wish that all of the price issues and the battery issues and like all that stuff I was just talking about, that it's like blocking so many cooler conversations that we could be having, at least about the potential for batteries and the effect EVs could have on society at large. So yeah, I would love to be at that phase in the conversation and how we can complement the grid, how people can make money by selling power from their car, or just there's so much you could do with these gigantic like mobile energy sources, which basically is what an EV is.
Yes, even to a point, you see a lot of people wait in the car parks, large supermarket. Chicago, maybe to think it's hot in the car, nobody wants to get out. And then, of course, that generating so much carbon monoxide, right? Sitting in a car park, if you're in a basement, right? But in the EVs, you can be sitting there. Watch your Netflix is like an old days, the drive-in movie. Nobody cares because you're not polluting indoors.
Yeah, absolutely. Even when I ride my bike and I'm choking on exhaust from a truck or something, I'm like, it'd be so much nicer out here if everything was just in.
I think we'll get there.
I think so too. Just not in 2024, but it would be nice if we could actually get there. So I hope more people are on board with it. And I think other countries, especially like Europe, everyone agrees they want to get there. Problem in the US is not everybody even agrees on that vision. So it's a little messy. I'm not really sure what Donald Trump in office would do as well. We got to see here. Hold on, buckle up, to use a car pun.
I think Europe is exception in that sense. Every time I went to Europe, we used to drive very big cars. In Australia, we had a 5.5 big V8 many years ago because then you go to Europe and say, oh my God, how do they even feed? Because the petrol price is so much more. So they always had the right thing because you have much cheaper petrol in US and anywhere else.
Except for in California, gas is really expensive, which is another reason why EVs are so successful. They're almost always cheaper. So that's an interesting parallel. So, of course, people are very simple. If it's cheaper to own something, they will do it. It's not quite the same everywhere.
Yeah, that's what is happening in Europe. So what we should do, I think we should pencil in another meeting next year this time and see how have we moved. I think that would be interesting.
Hopefully I'm wrong on everything.
I personally think that the momentum is coming, especially younger generation. Those people who are not buying into cars, who might buy an electric car, and people are using much more public transport, as you said, using Grabs and Ubers of the world, right? And those fleets will get electrified faster than individual. For them, the economics make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else I could have asked you?
No, you're great. This is fun stuff to talk about. I could talk about a million topics, but yeah, if any listeners want to get in touch with me about US market, EVs, batteries, what the car companies are saying, what the government's doing, I'm happy to talk about all this stuff all day. You can schedule another one with me, or anyone can. And my Twitter handle, or X, whatever we're calling it, is electric_humans. And then if you go on the PCMag website, if you search my name, then all my articles and my email and everything will pop up, and my background.
Thank you so much, Emily. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Energypreneurs. To continue listening to this conversation, please visit us at Energypreneurs. Thank you. See you next time.